The enemy reached the Velthara home system on a cold morning. Arya stood in her war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching fleet. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Black ships that moved through space like sharks through water. Behind her, military commanders shouted orders, trying to coordinate the final defense. But everyone in the room knew the truth. They were going to lose. The outer defense stations fell within hours. The enemy did not even slow down. They tore through shields and armor like paper. Velthara ships tried to form defensive lines, but the enemy moved around them, appearing behind them, above them, everywhere at once. It was like fighting smoke. On the surface of Velthara Prime, people were evacuating. Millions of civilians packed into ships, fleeing toward the inner colonies. But there was nowhere safe to go. The enemy had reached the heart of the Empire. If the throne world fell, everything fell. Arya felt numb. She watched the displays but could not process what she was seeing. Her mighty empire, 50,000 years of civilization, was ending. And it was happening so fast. In her mind, she kept seeing Jihoon's face. The human soldier who had walked away in silence. She had mocked him. She had called humans children. She had dismissed their warning. Now her people were dying because of her pride. "Your Majesty," Advisor Minho said quietly. He stood beside her, old and tired. "There is one option remaining." Arya knew what he was going to say. She had known for weeks, but she had refused to consider it. "No, we must contact Earth," Minho said. "They warned us. They knew this was coming. Perhaps they know how to fight it." "They have nothing," Arya said, her voice breaking. "You saw their ships. Their simple weapons. Their plain uniforms. What can they do that we cannot?" Minho placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes, Your Majesty, strength is not about having the best weapons. Sometimes it is about having the will to survive." Arya closed her eyes. Around her another alert sounded. Another fleet destroyed. Another million lives lost. She thought about the civilians evacuating below. The children being carried onto ships by frightened parents. The old and sick who could not move fast enough. All of them depending on her to save them. And she had no way to save them. "Send the message," she said quietly. The communication was drafted carefully. Arya wanted it to sound strong, dignified. She authorized Earth to assist in the defense. She phrased it as if she was doing them a favor, allowing them to prove themselves. But everyone who read the message understood what it really was. It was a cry for help from a queen who had run out of options. The message traveled through space faster than light, reaching Earth's military headquarters in the Sol system. General Sun Wuhan received it in his office. He was 60 years old, gray-haired and scarred from a lifetime of battles. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion, the same conflict that Jihoon had mentioned to Arya months ago. He read the message twice, then laughed. It was a bitter, angry laugh. "She still cannot admit she was wrong," Sun Wu said to his staff. "Even now, with her empire burning, she phrases it like she is granting us permission to help." His second-in-command, a colonel named Yuna Oh, frowned. "Should we ignore it? Let her learn the hard way?" Sun Wu almost said yes. A part of him wanted to, but then a voice spoke up from the back of the room. "There are children down there, sir," Jihoon said. He had returned to headquarters for debriefing, bringing all the data the Endurance had gathered. "Civilians who never insulted us. They do not deserve to die because their queen was foolish." The room fell silent. Everyone looked at Jihoon. He stood at attention, his expression neutral, but his eyes were intense. General Sun Wu studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You are right. We do not do this for her. We do it because it is the right thing to do." He turned to Yuna. "Mobilize the fleet, every ship we have. Send them to Velthara." Within hours, Earth's military was moving. It was not a large fleet compared to what the Velthara Empire had possessed. Maybe 300 ships in total, but they were fast ships, maneuverable ships built for combat in Earth's brutal solar system wars. The crews were experienced, hard-bitten survivors who had fought for resources over frozen moons and asteroid belts. They arrived at Velthara Prime 3 days later, emerging from faster-than-light travel in a tight formation. On the surface, Arya received notification that Earth's fleet had entered the system. She pulled up the display, expecting to see massive warships, dreadnoughts, carriers. Instead, she saw dozens of smaller vessels, cruisers and destroyers and frigates. "This is what they send?" she said in disbelief. "These tiny ships?" "Your Majesty," her tactical officer said nervously. Their approach pattern is unusual. They are not forming defensive lines. Arya watched as the human ships spread out, moving in seemingly random directions. Some headed toward the enemy fleet. Others angled toward the planet. A few broke off entirely, heading for the outer system. It looked chaotic, disorganized. It looked like they had no plan at all. The enemy noticed the human fleet. Several black ships turned toward them, moving to intercept. Arya held her breath, waiting to see Earth's mighty weapons in action. But the humans did not fire their biggest guns. Instead, they launched what looked like small drones, hundreds of them, tiny machines that scattered in all directions. The enemy ships paused. Arya could almost sense their confusion. They had adapted to every weapon the Velthara Empire possessed. Energy weapons, missiles, railguns, everything. But these drones did not attack. They just flew around, emitting strange signals. Then the human ships opened fire, but not at the enemy. They fired at debris fields, at destroyed Velthara ships floating in space. The wreckage exploded, creating clouds of metal fragments that drifted into the enemy's path. The black ships moved to avoid the debris, and suddenly they were no longer in formation. "What are they doing?" Arya whispered. On the Endurance, now part of the main fleet, Captain Doyen smiled. "We are doing what we do best, making chaos." Ji-hoon was suiting up with his team, preparing to deploy. Lieutenant Yoonji checked his gear, making sure everything was secure. Around them, other soldiers were doing the same. They all knew the plan. It was insane. It was desperate. But it was the only chance they had. The human fleet did not fight like the Velthara Empire had fought. They did not form lines and exchange fire in organized patterns. Instead, they darted in and out, hitting and running, creating confusion wherever they went. They used the debris fields as cover. They fired at angles that made no tactical sense. They split up, regrouped, and split up again. The enemy tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. The humans were not using superior technology. They were using unpredictability, chaos, and thousands of years of experience fighting dirty wars. A communication came through to Velthara Prime. It was General Sunwoo's voice. "Queen Arya, we need to coordinate our ground defenses. I am sending a team to your war room." Arya wanted to refuse. She wanted to maintain control of her own planet's defense, but she had no choice. "Permission granted," she said. 20 minutes later, Ji-hoon walked into her war room with a squad of human soldiers. Arya recognized him immediately, the same soldier she had mocked months ago. He bowed briefly, then approached the tactical table. "Your Majesty," he said calmly, "we need to discuss the defense strategy." Arya stared at him. This human, this primitive soldier from a species barely 2 centuries in space, was standing in her command center telling her they needed to discuss strategy. She opened her mouth to say something cutting, something to remind him of his place. But then she looked at the displays around her. Her empire was burning. Her people were dying. And this human had come to help despite everything she had said to him. "What do you recommend?" she asked quietly. Ji-hoon pulled up a holographic map of the planet. "The enemy feeds on fear and organized resistance. They have adapted to every conventional tactic because conventional tactics are predictable. We need to do the opposite." "Which is?" Arya asked. "Create controlled chaos," Ji-hoon said. "Make them think we have no plan. Make them think we are desperate and random. Then when they commit fully, we spring the trap." Arya looked at Advisor Minho, who nodded encouragingly. She looked back at Ji-hoon. "Your species has experience with this?" Ji-hoon met her eyes. "Your Majesty, we have fought ourselves for 10,000 years. Every type of war, every terrain, every tactic. We know war better than anything else in this galaxy." For the first time, Arya understood what she had missed before. These humans were not primitive. They were survivors. They had nearly destroyed themselves and somehow found a way to keep living. They had learned from their own mistakes in ways her empire never had. "Tell me your plan," she said. The battle for Velthara Prime began in earnest when the enemy fleet entered orbit. Hundreds of black ships descended through the atmosphere, heading for the major population centers. They moved with purpose, following patterns they had learned from destroying dozens of other worlds. They expected the defenders to protect the cities. They expected organized resistance. They expected conventional warfare. They got something else entirely. Sergeant Yuna Oh stood on a rooftop in the capital city, watching enemy ships approach. She was 35 years old. short and muscular with a dark sense of humor that kept her squad sane during the worst fighting. Behind her, demolition charges were planted across the entire district. Not just on the rooftop, not just on military targets, on buildings, bridges, tunnels, underground passages. The entire area was rigged to collapse. "They are getting close," her second-in-command said nervously. "Should we evacuate?" Yuna watched through her scope. "Not yet. Wait for it." The enemy ships slowed as they approached the city. They were scanning, looking for defenses, looking for weapons. They found some. Anti-aircraft batteries opened fire from prepared positions. The enemy ships adapted their shields and moved to destroy the batteries. Exactly as expected. "Now," Yuna said calmly. The charges detonated, but not all at once. In a sequence, one after another, creating a ripple effect. Buildings collapsed in specific directions, falling toward each other, creating avalanches of concrete and steel. The ground itself opened up as underground charges destroyed support structures. Within seconds, entire city blocks were falling into sinkholes, taking enemy ships with them. It was not elegant. It was not the Velthara way. It was brutal and destructive and effective. The enemy ships tried to pull up, but they were caught in the collapse. Debris slammed into them. Some managed to escape. Many did not. Yuna and her squad were already running, evacuating through tunnels they had prepared earlier. Behind them, the capital district crumbled into rubble. It would take years to rebuild. But it would take the enemy time to dig out their ships. Time was what humanity needed. In orbit, the space battle continued. Pilot Junho Shin flew his fighter through a debris field, chasing an enemy ship 3 times his size. He was 26 years old, reckless but brilliant. His cockpit displays were screaming warnings at him. Collision alerts. System failures, low fuel. He ignored all of them. Junho, pull back. His wing leader shouted over the radio. "You are too close." "Almost got him," Junho said through gritted teeth. He fired his thrusters, spinning his fighter in a move that would have killed a less experienced pilot. The enemy ship tried to follow, but it was too large, too slow. Junho led it straight into the remains of a destroyed Velthara dreadnought. At the last second, he pulled up hard. The enemy ship did not. It smashed into the wreckage at full speed. Junho whooped in victory, then checked his fuel gauge. He was running on fumes. "A wing leader? I might need a pickup." Down on the surface, another drama was unfolding. Mirai Lim was not a soldier. She was a civilian volunteer, a coordinator for refugee evacuations. She was 52 years old, a former teacher who had joined Earth's Crisis Response Corps after her husband died in the Titan crisis. Now she stood in a crowded shelter, trying to organize thousands of Velthara refugees. It was chaos. People were panicking, pushing, shouting in languages Mirai did not understand. Children were crying. The old and sick could not move quickly. And enemy ships were getting closer. "Listen to me," Mirai shouted, using a portable speaker to amplify her voice. "I know you are scared, but we have a way out. You have to trust me." A Velthara civilian, a mother holding 2 small children, looked at her with desperate eyes. "The evacuation routes are blocked. The military said it is impossible." Mirai smiled grimly. "The military does not know what is impossible. Follow me." She led them through a service tunnel that the Velthara military had deemed too dangerous. It was narrow, dark, and partially collapsed. But Mirai's team had scouted it earlier. They had installed lights, cleared debris, and marked safe paths. The refugees followed, terrified but trusting this strange human woman who seemed so confident. They emerged 2 miles away, outside the combat zone. Waiting ships picked them up and carried them to safety. Mirai did not rest. She immediately returned to the shelter to lead out the next group. In the war room, Arya watched all of this unfold on her displays. She saw Yuna's team destroying her own cities to trap enemy ships. She saw Junho's insane flying maneuvers that somehow worked. She saw Mirai leading her people through routes that Velthara military experts said were impossible. Nothing the humans did made sense according to conventional military doctrine. And yet it was working. Jihoon stood beside her, coordinating with his teams on the ground. He spoke quietly into his communicator, giving orders that sounded more like suggestions. "Try the eastern approach. If that does not work, improvise, improvise." That was a word Arya had never heard in a military context before. "Your soldiers do not follow strict orders," she observed. Jihoon glanced at her. "Strict orders do not work against an enemy that adapts. Our soldiers are trained to think for themselves, to react to changing situations. We give them objectives, not scripts. It went against everything Arya had learned about warfare. The Velthara military was built on hierarchy, on following commands precisely, but she could not argue with the results. The humans were holding their own against an enemy that had destroyed her empire. Then Dr. Jiwan's research paid off. The scientist contacted them from the Endurance, excitement in her voice. We have confirmed the weakness. The enemy ships communicate on a specific frequency. If we can disrupt it, they will lose coordination. How do we disrupt it? Arya asked. We need to plant disruption devices directly on their ships, Jiwan said. Close range, physical contact. Everyone in the war room fell silent. That was a suicide mission. The enemy ships had destroyed everything that got close to them. Their hulls were covered in defenses. Getting close enough to plant a device seemed impossible. I will do it, Ji-hoon said. No, Arya said immediately. I cannot ask you to... You are not asking, Ji-hoon interrupted. I am volunteering. This is what my team trained for. Arya looked at him. Really looked at him. This human soldier who had walked away in silence months ago, who had come back despite her insults, who was now willing to die to save her people. Why? She asked quietly. After everything I said to you, why would you do this? Ji-hoon's expression did not change. Because it is the right thing to do, because there are people down here worth saving, and because someone has to. Before Arya could respond, alert sounded across the war room. The enemy was doing something new. A massive ship, larger than any they had seen before, was entering orbit. It was broadcasting a signal, and suddenly all the enemy ships began moving in perfect coordination again. They were adapting to the human chaos tactics. That must be their command ship, Jiwan said. The central node of their hive mind. If we can destroy it, then the others will be confused, Ji-hoon finished. That is our target. He turned to leave, but Arya grabbed his arm. Wait, take this. She removed a small device from her uniform, a Velthara military transponder. This will identify you as operating under royal authority. Any Velthara forces will assist you. Ji-hoon took the device and nodded. Then he was gone, running toward the hangar where his team was waiting. The plan was simple and insane. Junho would fly Ji-hoon's team directly at the command ship. They would use the chaos of the battle as cover, weaving through debris and friendly fire. When they got close enough, they would board the enemy ship, plant the disruption devices, and try to escape before the ship tore itself apart. The odds of survival were almost zero. Junho brought his fighter in close to the assault shuttle carrying Ji-hoon's team. Ready for the craziest flight of your life? He asked over the radio. Just get us there, Ji-hoon replied. They launched into the battle. The space around Velthara Prime was full of fire and debris. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Weapons fire streaked in every direction, and through it all one small shuttle flew, dodging and weaving, somehow avoiding destruction. Inside the shuttle, Ji-hoon and his team prepared their equipment. Lieutenant Yoonji sat across from him, checking her weapon. If we die doing this, she said, I am going to be really annoyed. Ji-hoon almost smiled. Then we better not die. The enemy command ship loomed ahead, massive and dark. Its surface crawled with biological tissue that pulsed with alien life. Yoonho brought the shuttle in fast, using a destroyed Velthara cruiser as cover. At the last moment, he pulled up, exposing the shuttle's side hatch. Go, go, go! He shouted. Ji-hoon and his team jumped, using magnetic boots to latch onto the enemy ship's hull. The shuttle peeled away, chased by enemy fire. The team was alone on the surface of the most dangerous ship in the galaxy, carrying devices that might save everyone or kill them all. The surface of the enemy command ship felt alive under Ji-hoon's boots. The hull pulsed with organic tissue, warm and wet. His team moved quickly across it, planting disruption devices at key points that Dr. Jiwan had identified. Every second felt like an hour. At any moment, the ship could detect them and shake them off into space. Last device planted, Yoonji reported through her helmet radio. We need to get out of here. But before they could move, the hull beneath them rippled. Something was aware of their presence. Defensive systems activated, and suddenly the organic tissue was trying to pull them down, absorb them into the ship itself. Cut through it, Ji-hoon shouted. His team used plasma cutters to slice away the tissue, but more grew back immediately. They were trapped, being slowly pulled into the alien ship. Then Junho's voice crackled over the radio. Hold on, I'm coming back for you. Negative, Ji-hoon shouted. Activate the devices now. Do not wait for us. There was a pause. Then Dr. Jiwon's voice, quiet and sad. Activating in 3, 2, 1. The disruption devices came online, sending out a pulse of energy that the human team could not feel but the enemy ship could. The effect was immediate and devastating. The biological tissue stopped moving. The entire ship shuddered. And all across the Velthara system, enemy ships began behaving erratically. They lost coordination. They fired on each other. They moved in confused random patterns. The hive mind had been disrupted. On Velthara Prime, Arya watched the displays in amazement. The enemy fleet was falling apart. Her military forces, combined with the human ships, pressed the attack. Without coordination, the enemy ships were vulnerable. One by one, they were being destroyed, but she could not celebrate. Ji-hoon and his team were still trapped on that command ship. Can we get them out? She demanded. Captain Doyon shook his head. The ship is breaking apart. There is too much debris. We cannot get close enough. Arya felt something break inside her. These humans had saved her empire, and she could not save them. It was not fair. It was not right. Then, impossibly, a signal came through. Ji-hoon's voice, weak but steady. We found an escape pod. Velthara design. Must have been captured from an earlier battle. We are launching now. The escape pod shot out from the dying command ship just seconds before it exploded. The blast sent the small pod tumbling through space, but it was intact. Junho swooped in with his fighter and caught it with a tractor beam, pulling it to safety. When the pod was recovered and opened, Ji-hoon and his team stumbled out, alive but exhausted. Eunji was laughing and crying at the same time. I cannot believe that worked, she kept saying. The battle lasted another 6 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Without their command ship and with their communication disrupted, the enemy fleet was destroyed. The few ships that tried to escape were hunted down by combined human and Velthara forces. By the time the sun set on Velthara Prime, the threat was ended. But the cost had been terrible. Millions were dead across the empire. Entire cities lay in ruins. The economy was shattered. It would take decades to rebuild what had been lost in just a few months. 2 weeks later, Arya walked through the rubble of her capital city with Ji-hoon beside her. She insisted on seeing the damage herself, on understanding what her pride had cost. The crystalline towers that had once gleamed so beautifully were broken spires now. Refugees lived in temporary shelters. Children played in the ruins. This is my fault, Arya said quietly. If I had listened to you 3 months ago. We cannot change the past, Ji-hoon said. We can only learn from it. They visited a human field hospital where Velthara and human injured were being treated side by side. Arya watched as human doctors worked to save Velthara civilians, showing them the same care they showed their own people. One human nurse was holding the hand of a dying Velthara elder, speaking softly to him in his own language that she had learned in just 2 weeks. Why do you care so much? Arya asked. We rejected you. I insulted you. Why did you come back? Ji-hoon looked at her. Because we have been where you are now. We have known what it means to nearly destroy ourselves. We have learned that survival is not about being the strongest or the smartest. It is about being too stubborn to give up, and about helping others even when they do not deserve it. Arya asked about his scars then, the ones advisor Minho had noticed months ago. Ji-hoon told her about Earth's history, the wars that had killed billions, the near-extinction events, the times when humanity almost did not survive. He spoke of cities destroyed by nuclear fire, of plagues that wiped out entire continents, of conflicts fought over resources and beliefs and old hatreds. We almost destroyed ourselves a dozen times, he said. But we learned. Every war taught us something. Every mistake showed us a better way. We are still learning. Arya was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I owe you an apology. A real one. Not a political statement, not a formal declaration. A genuine apology from one person to another. You have it, Ji-hoon said simply. Is that enough? Arya asked. Thousands died because I was too proud to listen. No, Ji-hoon said honestly. An apology is not enough. But it is a start. The question is what you do next. What Arya did next was remember. She ordered a memorial built in the center of the capital, a place where every name would be recorded, human and Velthara alike, soldiers and civilians, the guilty and the innocent, every single person who had died in the war. And she insisted on reading every name herself. It took her 3 days, speaking constantly, until her voice was hoarse and her throat was raw. The ceremony was broadcast across the entire galaxy. People watched as their young queen stood before the memorial and took responsibility for her mistakes. She did not make excuses. She did not blame others. She simply acknowledged the truth and promised to do better. Ambassador Taehyung Yoon arrived from Earth to formalize the alliance. But the tone was different now. The negotiations were between equals, between partners who had fought and bled together. The treaty they signed was not one of protection or tribute. It was one of mutual respect and shared defense. Arya's younger brother, Prince Daehyun, was 12 years old and fascinated by the humans. He asked Jihoon to teach him about Earth, about its history and culture. Jihoon agreed and spent his evenings telling the young prince stories about humanity's long, painful journey to the stars. "Were you scared?" Daehyun asked one night. "When you were planting those devices on the enemy ship?" Jihoon thought about it. "Yes, I was terrified. But you did it anyway." "That is what courage is," Jihoon said. "Not the absence of fear, but doing what needs to be done despite the fear." As the human forces prepared to leave Velthara, Arya requested one final private meeting with Jihoon. They met in the same throne room where she had mocked him months before. But she did not sit on her throne. She stood before him as an equal. "Will we be ready when they return?" she asked. Because both of them knew the enemy would return eventually. This had been only one fleet, one attack. Somewhere in deep space, more were waiting. Jihoon met her eyes. "That depends on you. Will you remember what happened here? Will you listen to warnings? Will you work with others instead of commanding them?" Arya nodded slowly. "I will. I promise you I will." "Then you will be ready," Jihoon said. As he turned to leave, Arya did not watch with contempt or dismissal this time. She watched with respect, with gratitude, and with the understanding that she had learned something invaluable. Power without wisdom was nothing. Technology without strategy was useless. And pride without humility was deadly. The human ships departed from Velthara Prime on a clear morning. Aboard the Endurance, Jihoon stood at a viewport looking back at the planet. The crystalline towers were being rebuilt. Refugees were returning to their homes. Human and Velthara engineers worked side by side, designing better defenses for the next attack. Lieutenant Yoonji joined him at the viewport. "Do you think she really learned?" Jihoon was quiet for a moment. "I think she learned that she can learn. That is enough. And when the enemy comes back, then we fight again. But next time, we will not be alone." The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying them away from Velthara and back toward Earth. But they left something behind, not just weapons or technology, but hope. The hope that even proud empires could learn humility. The hope that even ancient civilizations could change. The hope that when darkness came again, the galaxy would stand together. On Velthara Prime, Arya stood on her balcony watching the stars. Advisor Minho joined her, placing a blanket over her shoulders against the cold night air. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. Arya shook her head. "My father would have listened to the warning the first time. He would not have let pride kill millions." "Your father was not perfect either," Minho said, "but he learned from his mistakes. As you are learning now." Arya thought about Jihoon's silence 3 months ago, how it had unsettled her even then. Now she understood what it had meant. It was not the silence of weakness or submission. It was the silence of someone who had nothing to prove, the silence of confidence that came from experience and survival. She had learned a hard lesson, one written in blood and ash. But she had learned it. And when the enemy returned, as they surely would, Velthara would be ready. Not because they had the best weapons or the most advanced technology, but because they had allies. 3 months passed since the humans left Velthara Prime. Queen Arya had forgotten about them entirely. She attended ceremonies, made decisions about trade routes, and enjoyed the pleasures of ruling the greatest empire in the galaxy. Life was good. Life was predictable. Then the reports started coming in. The first colony to fall was on the outer edge of Velthara space. A mining world called Cathara 7. It had 6 million inhabitants. The report was brief and confusing. Something had arrived. Something big. The colony sent distress signals for 3 hours, then went silent. When Arya sent ships to investigate, they found nothing. The planet was still there, but it was empty. The cities were gone. The people were gone. Even the atmosphere had changed. Arya was concerned but not alarmed. Space was dangerous. Accidents happened. She sent Admiral Sora Kwan with a battle group to secure the sector. Sora was confident and experienced. She had won 100 battles. She assured the Queen that whatever happened to Cathara 7 would not happen again. 2 weeks later, Sora's entire fleet was destroyed. The Admiral managed to send one final transmission before her ship went dark. Arya watched it in her private chambers, and for the first time in her life, she felt real fear. The recording showed Sora's face bleeding from a cut above her eye, alarms blaring in the background. "They are not like anything we have fought before," Sora said, her voice shaking. "Our weapons barely slow them down. They adapt to everything. They learn from every attack. Your Majesty, you need to evacuate the outer colonies. You need to." The transmission ended in static. Arya sat in silence for a long time. Then she called an emergency meeting of her military council. Dozens of generals and admirals appeared on holographic displays, all of them looking worried. She ordered a full mobilization. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. The Velthara Empire would show this enemy what real power looked like. But the enemy kept coming. Colony after colony fell. Entire star systems went dark. The enemy ships were massive, black as space itself, covered in what looked like living tissue. They moved in strange patterns, appearing and disappearing without warning. They did not communicate. They did not make demands. They simply consumed everything in their path. Arya threw everything she had at them. She sent her best fleets, her most advanced weapons, her most brilliant commanders. Nothing worked. The enemy learned from every battle. If you used energy weapons, they adapted shields. If you used missiles, they developed countermeasures. If you tried to ram them, they phased through your ships like ghosts. After 2 months, the Velthara Empire had lost 40% of its outer territories. Billions were dead or missing. Panic spread through the remaining colonies. Refugees flooded toward the inner worlds, overwhelming the infrastructure. The economy began to collapse. And still the enemy advanced. What Arya did not know was that humans were watching everything. Captain Doyen Lee commanded a small Earth ship called the Endurance. It was not a warship, not really. It was a reconnaissance vessel, designed to observe and record. For the past 3 months, Doyen and his crew had been shadowing the enemy fleet, staying just out of sensor range, watching every battle, recording every tactic. Doyen was 40 years old, thin and tired-looking, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His crew was small, just 20 people, but they were specialists. Dr. Jiwon Nam was his science officer, a xenobiologist who studied alien life. She spent her days analyzing the enemy, trying to understand what they were and how they worked. Jihoon was also on the Endurance. He was part of a reconnaissance team, soldiers trained in observation and intelligence gathering. He spent his shifts watching through powerful scopes as Velthara worlds burned. He watched cities fall. He watched ships explode in silent flashes of light. He watched people die. "We should help them," said Lieutenant Yunji Baek one day. She stood beside Jihoon at the observation station, her hands clenched into fists. "We could at least warn them about the enemy's tactics." Jihoon did not look away from the scope. "We tried to warn them 3 months ago. The Queen made her decision. But innocent people are dying down there." "I know," Jihoon said quietly. "Keep recording everything." It was hard to watch and do nothing. The crew of the Endurance struggled with it every day. But their mission was clear. They needed to understand the enemy before they could fight it. Humanity had survived this long by being careful, by learning, by never rushing into fights they could not win. Dr. Jiwon made progress slowly. She discovered that the enemy ships were not entirely mechanical. They were biological, or perhaps a fusion of biology and technology. They seemed to share information instantly, like a hive mind. When one ship learned something, all ships learned it. That explained why they adapted so quickly. "They are intelligent," Jiwon said during a briefing. "Very intelligent. But their intelligence is different from ours. They think as a collective. They cannot understand individuals acting alone. Captain Doyen nodded thoughtfully. That could be a weakness, but we need more data. So they kept watching. They followed the enemy fleet as it carved through Velthara space. They rescued refugees when they could, small groups that managed to escape in damaged ships. The humans would appear, pull survivors aboard, provide medical care and food, then vanish again before anyone could ask questions. Some refugees spoke of ghost ships that appeared in their darkest moments. Others thought they had hallucinated from shock. Back on Velthara Prime, Arya was falling apart. She barely slept anymore. Her beautiful silver skin had grown pale. She snapped at her advisors and made desperate decisions. She could not understand how her mighty empire was losing. Her fleets had defeated every enemy for thousands of years. Her technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. How could she be losing to these creatures? Advisor Minho watched the young queen with sadness. She had been so confident 3 months ago, so certain of her power. Now she was learning the hardest lesson a ruler could learn. Power meant nothing if you did not know how to use it. Your Majesty, Minho said one evening, perhaps it is time to reconsider the human offer. Arya turned on him, her eyes blazing. The humans? Those primitives? What could they possibly do that we cannot? They tried to warn us, Minho said gently. They knew this enemy was coming. Perhaps they know how to fight it. No, Arya said firmly. I will not beg for help from children. We will find a way, we must find a way. But in her heart she knew the truth. The Empire was dying. The enemy was unstoppable. And she had sent away the only people who might have helped her prepare. On the Endurance, Jihoon watched another Velthara world fall. This one was called Mekthar, a garden planet with beautiful forests and clean oceans. The enemy ships descended like locusts. Within hours, the forests were ash and the oceans were boiling. Yunji stood beside him, tears running down her face. How many more? She whispered. As many as it takes, Jihoon said. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands were shaking. Until we understand them, until we know how to kill them. Dr. Jiwan called everyone to the lab that night. She had discovered something important. The enemy ships communicated through a specific frequency, a kind of biological radio wave. If that frequency could be disrupted, the ships might become confused, separated from the collective mind. But we need to test it, Jiwan said. We need to get close to one of their ships and deploy a disruption device. Captain Doyun looked at Jihoon. That is a job for your team. Jihoon nodded. We will be ready. But they would not act yet. Not until the time was right. Not until the enemy was close enough to the Velthara home world that the Queen had no choice but to accept help. It was a cold calculation, but it was necessary. Humanity could not save the Velthara Empire alone. They needed Arya to be desperate enough to listen, to learn, to work together. So they waited and watched as the enemy advanced. And Jihoon thought about the Queen who had mocked him 3 months ago. He wondered if she remembered his face. He wondered if she understood yet what silence meant. The crystalline towers of Velthara Prime stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the largest tower, the throne room gleamed with light from 1,000 worlds. Queen Arya sat on her throne, young and beautiful at 24 years old. Her silver skin caught the light as she shifted, bored by another day of diplomatic meetings. Around her, creatures from 100 different planets stood in attendance. Some had scales, others had fur, and many had features that no Earth creature could claim. All of them bowed when she looked their way. The massive doors opened with a sound like singing crystal. A group of beings walked in and the entire court fell silent. They looked strange compared to the others. They walked on 2 legs and had skin in shades of brown and tan. Their clothing was simple, almost plain. No jewels, no glowing armor, no floating crowns. Just gray uniforms with small patches on the shoulders. These were humans. The newest species to reach the stars. Commander Hyeri Choi led the group. She was older, maybe 50 Earth years, with short black hair and tired eyes. Behind her walked several soldiers, all wearing the same gray uniforms. One of them was Private Jihoon Kim. He was 28 years old, Average height with dark eyes and hands that had seen hard work. Nothing about him seemed special or remarkable. Arya leaned back on her throne and smiled. It was not a kind smile. "So these are the humans," she said. Her voice carried across the enormous room. "I have heard stories about your kind. You only left your home planet 200 years ago. My empire has ruled the stars for 50,000 years." Commander Hieri bowed her head slightly. "Your Majesty, we come seeking an alliance. There is a threat approaching from deep space. We have tracked it for months. It destroys everything in its path," the Queen laughed. The sound echoed off the crystal walls. "A threat? You come to warn us about a threat?" She looked around at her advisors, who smiled nervously. What could possibly threaten the Velthera Empire? "We have conquered 3 spiral arms of this galaxy. Our fleets number in the millions. This enemy is different," Hieri said carefully. "They do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They consume entire worlds." Arya waved her hand dismissively. "I have heard such warnings before. Pirates, raiders, desperate colonies. They all fall before Velthara power." She stood up from her throne and walked down the steps. Her dress flowed behind her like liquid silver. "But you humans, you are amusing. You think 2 centuries of space travel makes you our equals?" She stopped in front of the human delegation. Her eyes moved from face to face until they settled on Jihoon. He stood at attention, his expression neutral, his hands at his sides. "You," Arya said, pointing at him. "Step forward." Jihoon did as ordered. He walked 3 steps and stopped, maintaining eye contact with the Queen. Around the room, aliens whispered to each other. Some had never seen a human up close before. "You are a soldier?" Arya asked. "Yes, Your Majesty," Jihoon replied. His voice was quiet but steady. The Queen circled him slowly, examining him like a merchant examining goods. "What wars have you fought, human soldier?" "The Mars Rebellion, Your Majesty. The Titan Crisis. The Belt Conflicts." Arya laughed again, this time louder. "Mars, Titan? These are places in your own star system, are they not?" She looked at her court. "He has fought his own kind over rocks and ice. And now he comes to teach us about war?" Several aliens in the court laughed along with her. But some did not. An old advisor named Minho Park stood near the throne, watching carefully. He had served 3 generations of Velthara rulers. He noticed things others missed. And he noticed the scars on Jihoon's hands. Old scars, the kind that came from real fighting. "Your equipment," Arya continued, gesturing at Jihoon's uniform. "It looks so simple, so primitive. Where is your energy shielding? Your molecular armor? Your neural enhancement?" "We rely on training, Your Majesty," Jihoon said. "Training," Arya repeated as if the word was funny. "Do you know what real war is, human? War against species that have mastered physics you cannot comprehend. War across dimensions and through time itself?" Jihoon said nothing. "I thought not," Arya said. She returned to her throne and sat down. "Let me be clear, humans. Your warning is noted but unnecessary. Your offer of alliance is rejected. The Velthara Empire does not need protection from children who play with rockets." Commander Hieri's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "Your Majesty, we have data. Recordings of the enemy. Please at least review what we have learned." "No," Arya said flatly. "I have wasted enough time today. However, I am not without mercy. If your species wishes to become tributaries of the Empire, we will consider protecting you. You would need to provide resources, of course. Labor. Perhaps some of your soldiers could serve in our armies, under proper supervision." The silence in the room was heavy. Every alien present understood what the Queen had just said. She was offering to make humanity into servants, into property of the Empire. Commander Hieri opened her mouth to respond, but Jihoon moved first. He bowed, a formal military bow, holding it for exactly 3 seconds. Then he straightened, turned on his heel, and walked toward the door. He did not look back. He did not speak. He simply left. The other human soldiers followed him. One by one, they bowed and departed in complete silence. Commander Hieri was the last to leave. She met Arya's eyes for a long moment before she too bowed and walked away. The massive doors closed behind them with that same singing sound. Arya sat on her throne, feeling suddenly strange. The laughter had stopped. Her court stood in uncomfortable silence. Something about the way Jihoon had left bothered her, though she could not explain why. He had not argued. He had not shown anger. He had simply accepted her words and departed with dignity. "Your Majesty," Advisor Minho said quietly, stepping closer to the throne. Perhaps we should have listened to their warning. They are children, Minho, Arya said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. What could they possibly know that we do not? The old advisor said nothing. He had seen that look in a soldier's eyes before. The look Jihoon had worn. It was not the look of someone who had fought small wars over rocks and ice. It was the look of someone who had seen something terrible and survived it. But Arya was young, and she was queen, and she believed in the power of her empire. So she dismissed the humans from her thoughts and moved on to the next appointment of the day. Outside in the landing bay, the human ships prepared for departure. Jihoon stood at a viewport, looking back at the crystalline towers one last time. A fellow soldier, Lieutenant Yunji Bayek, stood beside him. She'll regret that, Yunji said quietly. Jihoon did not answer. He simply turned away from the window and walked toward his ship. Behind him, the towers of Velthara Prime gleamed in the alien sun, beautiful and unaware of what was coming.